Hello and welcome to our special program, To The Point. Recently, in a judgment, the Supreme Court has directed the Election Commission of India to include none of the above options in the EVM machines as well as ballot papers for the voters to go ahead and mark their dissent with one or all the contesting candidates. We have with us the former Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. S Y Quraishi. So, welcome to the show. A very significant judgment. And pleased to say that the timing is also perfect since the 5 states are going to go to elections in just a few weeks or say maybe around a month's time. And then the general elections approaching in 2014 as well. First thing which I would like to know, and through you, I would also, my viewers would also like to know as to, is it the first step towards right to reject?
There is no straight answer. In a way, yes, it is. But it's very clear that unlike what people think, this judgment has not created the right to reject. This has only confirmed the right of negative voting to the voters and has asked the Election Commission to create a button on the machine and also a column in the paper, on the ballot paper. And besides that, the Supreme Court has has made two more interesting observations. One is the quality of candidates, and it has said that through negative voting, the political parties will be compelled to put up candidates with better moral and ethical values, which means implying thereby that at the moment the kind of candidates we have do not fulfill this qualification. And fourthly, very significantly, the Supreme Court has also made a comment on voter apathy. And it has dwelt at length on this, that sitting at home on the poll day and not going there at all is not good for a conscientious citizen and a responsible citizen. That's what the Supreme Court says. Therefore, it is better that you go to the polling station and exercise your negative vote if that is what you choose, and that is the import of the judgment.
You're right. Two important observations made by the Supreme Court. Let's take them one by one. Let's first talk about the first observation wherein it says that it'll bring about a systemic change in the way the candidates are being chosen by the political parties. As a former Chief Election Commissioner who's conducted many elections, who's been part of the system, do you believe that this kind of systemic change is as easy as it seems it might come from this particular decision?
Well, my personal feeling is that moral pressure is not going to work on political parties, because if it was to work, it should have worked already, because after all, there has been a lot of hue and cry about the quality of candidates, the candidates with serious criminal charges pending against them. The fact that we have 162 MPs today against whom, by their own admission, through the affidavit, they have admitted that they have criminal cases pending against them. And the fact that this trend is increasing, as clear from the fact that in the previous parliament, from previous Lok Sabha, such number was only 124. It has gone up to 162. The fact that people have been expressing their concern about criminalization of politics. In that context, despite that, the political parties refused to bring that amendment in the act which we have been demanding, that people against whom serious cases are pending should be debarred from contesting. Political parties have rejected all that. So, if very direct pressure has not worked, so moral pressure to work on political parties, that's not our experience in India.
This decision of the Supreme Court, many say, is to try and devise a mechanism wherein to prevent the voter from being captive of bad choices. For example, if I'm a voter and in my constituency there is an election, there are 4 candidates who are contesting. till the time none of the above option was not there, if I had to go and cast my vote, which is not compulsory, again one point which we will talk about a little later in the program, but if I have to go and cast my vote, and I don't like all four of them, I'll end up casting my vote for the person whom I have least likeness for.
Quite right. You know, that exactly is the logic on which NOTA issue has been raised again and again by civil society. And at the same time, even the Election Commission itself, before the PUCL writ petition went to the Supreme Court in 2004, in 2001,
yes,
Election Commission itself had written to the government that there should be an amendment in the rules, conduct of election rules, whereby we should be allowed to set up a button in the EVM called none of the above. Although we are not in favor of the right to reject. Now then the question will be, if we do not support the right to reject, why is it that we are asking for NOTA? For totally different reasons. The one was to protect the secrecy of the voter. When you go to vote, nobody knows who you voted for. But if you don't go to vote at all, the candidates in your constituency know that you did not. Suppose he lost by a very narrow margin, he will come and beat you up. Look, you didn't go to vote, and that's why I lost. And so that's why, you know, against reprisal, we have to protect the voter. So we wanted that 49.0, the rule should be dropped actually, because it's an old rule from the days of ballot papers.
And then protect the voters' right to go ahead and have secrecy about what he did,
right.
what he voted for, whether or not.
Right. So now how will none of the above protect this secrecy? You know, earlier in the ballot paper days, what happened was that you could go and you will take a ballot paper and fold it blank and put it in the box blank. So it's an invalid vote. Or you will put your stamp in 2-3 places, smudge it so badly that it will be declared a invalid vote. Or sometimes, you know, many cynics would write sab chor hain and fold it up and then put it in the box. All these were invalid votes. Now, but at the same time, nobody knew that you are the guy who did not vote. Now, in the new system, in the EVM, when you go inside the polling booth and the voting compartment, when you press a button, there is a loud beep, which is audible in the entire polling station, in fact, even outside, to ensure that there is no bogus polling after the polling hours. Now, if you go and do not press the button, everybody will know that there is no beep, and they say, oh, this guy has not voted. So you will be exposed, and for which there could be reprisals. So we were demanding it basically to guard your secrecy. And also an additional reason that if you do not go at all, as most people do, particularly in urban areas, then
that's an interesting point as to how will it affect as far as voting trend in urban areas and rural areas is concerned. We'll definitely come to that, but before that, let's take a short break, and when we come back, we will have several other questions. It's not only about the trend of the voting, but also the recommendations which were made by the Election Commission itself, and why, as you were pointing out, there is a difference between a right to reject and none of the above option. Let's take a short break out here. Welcome back. Mr. S Y Quraishi, former Chief Election Commissioner, is still with us. So before we went into the break, you were talking about why the Election Commission had itself recommended about NOTA, but not about the right to reject. And you're talking about how it might affect the urban voters, because the percentage of voting in urban areas is in any ways lesser than what it is in rural areas. Many say that this might end up becoming just an urban phenomenon.
You know, what I was saying was that there were two reasons for us to support NOTA. One was secrecy, the other was that bogus voting in your name, if you don't go there at all, they will know that this chap is absent and somebody else may be put up as a proxy for you. So to guard against that, Supreme Court has commented on both these, and they have supported both these arguments, and which is why they allowed NOTA. And as regard voter apathy, particularly in urban areas, we feel very concerned. It is very ironical that people in their drawing room criticize the government and politicians without actually participating in the process.
And not come out and vote.
And not come out and vote. So this is not acceptable, and it's a I'm very happy that Supreme Court has commented on that this is not a desirable thing in a responsible democracy, that you just sit at home It's better that you go and express your opinion, even if it is a negative opinion.
But there is a counter view to this as well. The last point which you made about those who rather prefer sitting in the comfort of their own drawing rooms and criticize the government. The counter view is, why would those people now come out and take the trouble of going all the way to the voting booth just to press that button of none of the above?
Well, that is what Supreme Court has commented on, that you should show your participation and just don't be lazy, paying lip service to democracy, criticize the politicians, because painting politicians black also is very dangerous, let me tell you. As I keep saying, we can't love democracy and hate politicians. You have to participate. And what happens if you don't go? Some candidate who, in your opinion, may be undesirable will get elected. So the answer is probably you go in large numbers and out of the existing lot choose the good ones. So by not going, you are leaving the field open to the candidates whom you really don't like.
But the negative voting, that's none of the using none of the above option would be termed as negative voting in the electoral parlance. The negative voting does not carry the weight of altering the outcome of the result. So what's the effective use of having this as far as having an impact on how political parties might be, as you were saying in the first segment of the program, might actually have that moral obligation to go ahead and change candidates? If it's not altering the outcome of the result, they might not.
Yes, that's my feeling, but also based on experience. For instance, in the UP elections recently, out of almost 12-14 crore voters, only the 3,400 people turned up demanding their right under 49(0), not wanting to vote. After all the campaign of the activists, civil society activists, Anna Hazare, Kiran Bedi, everyone, just 3,000. Maybe it will become 30,000. Whether it's going to alter result and it will compel parties to put up good candidates, I have my doubts. But although the other two objectives which we Election Commission was seeking have been achieved, and whether moral pressure will be effective or not, it will be for us to see. But at the moment, I am not very sure.
One very important point which I have in my mind right now is, and something which you also pointed out, that when the Election Commission was making recommendation in 2001, it did make recommendation for having none of the above options but not to have right to reject option. Would you still believe, or rather argue with those critics who are not in favor of the recommendations which were made by the Election Commission, which were not made by the Election Commission, is that democracy is all about electing candidates? It cannot be about rejecting candidates.
Actually, that was the argument made by the government in the Supreme Court case, and the Supreme Court rejected this. That democracy is not just voting for a candidate, it is also about expressing negative opinion. And Supreme Court gave an analogy. In Parliament, there is a yes vote, there is a no vote, and there is an abstention. Now, which is what they have tried to create through this analogy, that abstention is also, in a way, an expression of an opinion. Negative vote is also an opinion. So, Supreme Court has given importance to the right of negative opinion. In fact, it's very, very important. The debate has missed this point. Supreme Court has gone to the extent of equating it with the fundamental right. Yeah. Because they say that expressing negative opinion is a part of your freedom of expression, which is ensured through Article 21. In fact, even the voting right is not considered a constitutional right, but through this judgment, indirectly, the voting right and positive vote or negative vote, they have all been raised to the level of right to freedom of expression in Article 21.
Fundamental right.
Yes.
A very, very, very significant one. When we come back, we'll also seek your opinion on certain other points and several other measures as far as electoral reforms are concerned, very much related to this particular decision which has come in from the Supreme Court about none of the above options. But before that, let's take a short break out here. Welcome back. We have with us former Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. S Y Quraishi, and we are having a very interesting conversation on the recent Supreme Court decision about none of the above options. One very important point which has been raised by the critics of this particular judgment is that when implemented, this particular step will further bring down the margin of victory, which is already too less.
Well, actually, margin of victory in the kind of system that we follow, first past the post
First past
system.
the vote.
So it doesn't really matter. If you win by one vote, it's the same thing as winning by 100,000 votes or 5 lakh votes. It's the same thing. Winner is a winner. That's the concept of first past the post. So that doesn't really matter.
So this eventually affecting the margin of victory is something which might not have a...
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, one very important aspect as far as electoral reforms are concerned, in addition to none of the above options, is the very fact that there has been a consistent demand from several quarters, be it the social sector, be it the Election Commission itself making that recommendation in 2001, the recommendations from the Law Commission in its 170th report. The main basis of the entire process of electoral reforms has been to weed away criminality from the political system, from the electoral system. This particular decision seems to be pushing that idea one step further. But given the fact, as you were saying in the first part of the program itself, given the fact that this kind of disagreement between the executive, judiciary and the polity, how far do you believe this kind of judgment will have a long-lasting impact on the overall process of electoral reforms, which is too many wider options, too many other steps which needs to be taken, which are yet to be looked upon in seriousness?
Actually, this is a very significant judgment and progress in electoral reforms. I've already mentioned the 4 points which come out of this judgment, including voter apathy, moral pressure on the political parties about the candidate, the right of negative voting, the most important thing, right of secrecy of voting. All these concepts have been very clearly enunciated by this judgment. The only thing in which it has fallen short is the right to reject. That has not been created for the simple reason that it was not even demanded. I read the judgment, and unless there was something which is not in my knowledge, but the judgment records the history of the case, nobody demanded that none of the above should lead to right to reject, the rejection of all the candidates. That was not the demand. So that's why Supreme Court has not even given it.
But if at all, there is now the next logical step, as we were saying earlier, might be a demand for right to reject. How will that particular demand, if at all accepted, this is a very hypothetical question, but if at all accepted, what I can imagine is that right to reject will then translate into re-election?
Yes, quite right. That is the reason why you will recall that when this demand was made, this has been in the air for a long time, but when Anna Hazare's agitation was at its peak, Anna Hazare especially demanded that there should be a right to reject and right to recall. And at that time, when I was the CEC, then we had rejected both these demands outright. And we had given our detailed reasons for that. After that, Anna Hazare and his entire team came to meet me, and we had a discussion about that, and they wanted to know why is it that we are opposing the right to reject. And the first reason we gave was that we feel that if it leads to re-election, now re-election again is a full-fledged election management, and it has lots of costs. In the sense, the staff which is deployed, they will be deployed for a long period. School teachers who conduct the elections will have to be deployed. Since polling stations are in schools, this will disturb education, so children's education, normal work, and when the model code is in operation, the government cannot announce new policies, new programs. So lots of things come to a standstill. So, and if we keep on going election, and people already accuse, they already speak of election fatigue, because we have local body elections, we have Vidhan Sabha elections, we have the Lok Sabha elections, every now and then elections. So in that context, so Anna made a very interesting point there in our meeting. He said that your fear that it will lead to too many re-elections may not actually happen, because it will prove to be it may happen once or twice, 3 times, but after that political parties will become alert and they will not put up such candidate. And he made another good point, that he said, look, you have been demanding that criminals should be debarred, but political parties are not listening to you. You have been asking for money control, but still there is a lot of money in circulation. But through the right to reject, if they find after spending 5-10 crores, you get rejected and you can't even stand again. So that is what will make you wary. So and actually on that argument, we said that you have a point which is worth considering, and probably let us have a debate on this. Let this be examined by the government, by parliament and everybody, the pros and cons of a right to reject. So, but after all, we also have to deploy the security forces. People generally don't know where do we get them. We ask the Home Ministry, and with great difficulty they pull out forces from even the borders, threatening the borders, from insurgency areas. So there may be a cost involved. There may be serious implications. We can do it for a short period. We can't prolong it. So there are lots of downsides for right to reject. Also, now the people's anger may be against the 2, 3, 4 major candidates, but you are a gentleman. If you might be a candidate, why should you be disqualified?
I will be a part of the panel. I'll also get rejected.
I think if it becomes a legal and constitutional issue, this probably will weigh supreme, because an innocent man's right should not be affected for the misdeeds of some others.
One very important point which has been raised by some is that this particular option, none of the above option, might be misused in certain areas where we have insurgency, such as the Naxal affected areas, wherein the insurgent elements might force voters to go ahead and make use of this particular option.
No. I rule it out completely, because it's not true. Because we have conducted elections in all those areas which you mentioned. Now these guys keep making appeals for boycott, but nobody really cares. If their appeal was so strong, the people will boycott. They will not even come for the election. But it doesn't really work. I would rather that if they have so much of appeal, let them contest themselves and win the elections. So I think we are giving too much to the power of their appeal. It doesn't really work.
One very last question which I would like to ask you about the confusion, a bit of confusion which surrounds this particular decision is the uncertainty over what will happen if a particular number of people go ahead and push that button, none of the above options. How will the process unfold from here? What if more than 50% of the electorate in that particular constituency push that none of the above options, or maybe say 25% or 30%? What's the mechanism? How will it?
If 99 voters press none of the above and 1 votes for Vishal, for us Vishal is the winner, because that is the only genuine legitimate vote. All others are non-votes, invalid votes. So this is the legal position. So whether it is 50% NOTA or 70% or 30%, in present dispensation, it doesn't really matter.
So effectively, this is simply a tool in ensuring that a little bit of probity in public life can be brought about. Political parties can be morally pressurized to go ahead and ensure that the criminals do not enter the political system. But if at all it has to have more legal connotations, we might have to go ahead and bring in some fundamental changes in the way the electoral and political system is run.
Yes, that's absolutely. It only has moral pressure value.
Moral pressure.
To the extent moral pressure can work on politicians.
Well, let's hope that this moral pressure does work on the politicians and political parties. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being in the Rajya Sabha TV. So this was former Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. S Y Quraishi, who was having a freewheeling conversation with us on how the recent Supreme Court judgment of including none of the above options will have an impact, and how it might go ahead and change the way we look at election or electoral reforms. We'll come back next week with a different personality and a different topic. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.